The golden light of morning bathed Westminster Abbey, but what unfolded that day was far more than ceremony. It was history in motion. When Prince William and Catherine Middleton stepped into view, the world seemed to pause. Every camera clicked. Every heart held its breath. It wasn't just their coronation entrance that stunned the nation. It was a story behind it. The love, the legacy, the unspoken presence of Princess Diana, and the promise of a future monarch's reign. This was no ordinary royal arrival. It was unforgettable. If moments like this stir something in your heart, you're in the right place. Join us as we uncover the story behind William and Kate's breathtaking entrance, layer by layer, emotion by emotion. Don't forget to hit like, tap subscribe, and share this video with friends who love a royal story told with depth and heart. Let's relive history together, one chapter at a time. The city of London awoke under a golden haze at morning, yet it was no ordinary sunrise. There was something in the air, a hum, a pulse, that told everyone this day was different. Streets that were normally filled with a rush of taxis and hurried office workers had transformed into rivers of anticipation. Flags waved gently in the breeze, and the silhouette of Westminster Abbey stood proudly against the horizon, its towers glowing as if touched by the hand of history itself. The old stones had seen coronations, funerals, jubilees, and wars, but today they would witness something uniquely human and deeply emotional, the union of Prince William and Catherine Middleton. Inside her private chamber, Catherine stood before a tall mirror, a woman on the edge of history, for all the preparation and rehearsal, for the years of etiquette lessons, protocols, and the weight of royal expectation. She still saw Kate, the young woman from Berkshire, with a smile that could melt away formality in an instant. Her gown hung nearby, delicate yet commanding, ivory silk and lace that seemed to whisper the promise of fairy tales fulfilled. It wasn't just a dress. It was a symbol of her crossing from one life into another. The air inside her room was filled with hushed voices and the soft swish of brushes as stylists worked with precision. Her mother, Carol, entered quietly, and for a moment, the scene shifted from royal grandeur to something achingly familiar, a mother seeing her daughter on the morning of her wedding. Tears glistened in Carol's eyes, pride and nostalgia mingling. She remembered the little girl who once raced through fields, hair flying wild in the wind, and here she was now, about to walk into Westminster Abbey as a future queen. Catherine squeezed her mother's hand, and no words were needed. The gesture said it all. "I'm still me. I'm still your daughter." Elsewhere, Prince William was pacing like a soldier preparing for battle. His uniform was crisp, polished to perfection, but his restless hands betrayed the storm within. Despite years of duty, despite countless appearances, this moment felt different. Butterflies rose in his stomach in waves, and he adjusted his jacket for what seemed like the 100th time. His thoughts drifted, unbidden, to his mother. Diana's presence lingered in every memory, every flash of a camera, every beat of his heart that morning. How she would have smiled, how she would have beamed with pride. Though absent, she was there, woven into the fabric of the day like a blessing whispered on the wind. As the city stirred, so too did the people. Crowds had begun gathering at first light, many camping overnight just to be part of the occasion. Union Jacks fluttered in eager hands, and strangers leaned on one another as if they were old friends. Tourists from faraway countries stood shoulder to shoulder with lifelong Londoners, all drawn by the same magnetic pull of history. Street vendors shouted over the noise, selling mugs and scarves that would soon be displayed on mantels and shelves as souvenirs of this living fairy tale. Children perched high on their fathers' shoulders, craning for a glimpse of the carriages, while elderly couples recalled stories of past royal weddings, their voices laced with reverence. And then, like a drumbeat calling the world to attention, the Abbey bells began to toll. Their deep, solemn tones rolled across London, echoing through alleyways and over rooftops. It was a sound that spoke of history, of continuity, of something greater than one couple. To the crowd, it was both a signal and an invitation. The moment has arrived. Inside the Abbey, the atmosphere was no less electric. Guests of extraordinary rank and prestige found their seats. Prime ministers, foreign royalty, dignitaries, and celebrities filled the ancient pews, yet for once their titles seemed to blur. They, too, were witnesses. They, too, craned their necks, hushed their whispers, and shared in the anticipation of what was to come. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass, scattering jewels of color across the stone floors, as if the heavens themselves were painting a canvas for the sacred day. Meanwhile, in his own quarters, William received a final pep talk from his younger brother. Harry's trademark humor broke through the tension, coaxing a laugh from the groom who had worn his nerves openly all morning. Their bond, unspoken but unbreakable, carried a special weight. Harry wasn't just a best man. He was William's anchor, reminding him that beyond the ceremony, beyond the global audience of billions, this was simply two brothers sharing one of life's milestones together. Back in her chamber, Catherine took a final breath before donning the gown. As the silk fell into place and the lace caught the morning light, she transformed, not just into a bride, but into a figure of history. Yet beneath the tiara and the veil, she remained unmistakably herself. There was no trace of arrogance, no pretension, only quiet grace. She turned once more to the mirror, and for a fleeting second, her expression softened with wonder. How did it come to this? She seemed to ask silently. From the carefree days at university, from chance meetings and tentative beginnings, to now, this very moment where she would step into 1,000 years of tradition. Her father, Michael, arrived to escort her. His face carried both pride and disbelief. To walk his daughter down the aisle of Westminster Abbey, to give a hand to the future king, was something no parent could ever prepare for. He offered his arm, and Catherine, with a radiant yet steady smile, accepted. The weight of destiny rested on her shoulders, but the strength of family steadied her steps. The moment had arrived. As the Rolls-Royce Phantom turned its final corner, Westminster Abbey revealed itself in full majesty. Its towering Gothic arches and centuries-old stones seemed to glow in the morning light, as if touched by divine hands. Catherine's breath caught. This was no ordinary building. It was a place where history itself had been written and rewritten. Kings and queens had been crowned here. Generations of monarchs had stood on these very steps. And now, she would join them, not as a crowned ruler, but as a bride about to step into a life forever changed. Inside the car, the silence was almost sacred. Catherine sat poised, her gown carefully arranged to avoid wrinkles, the lace veil falling like soft mist around her face. Her father, Michael, sat beside her, his hand resting gently over hers. He had always been a steady guide, but never had the responsibility felt so heavy. With every turn of the wheels, his little girl was being carried closer to a threshold from which there was no turning back. He glanced at her, and for just a heartbeat, he saw the child she once was. Yet the woman beside him radiated grace, composure, and quiet strength. Through the bulletproof windows, the crowd came alive. Thousands pressed forward against barriers, eager for even the briefest glimpse. Some shouted her name, others simply waved flags in joyful frenzy. From balconies, windows, and rooftops, faces turned toward the motorcaders' television cameras beamed the images to every corner of the globe. Commentators spoke in hushed tones, translating the grandeur into dozens of languages, their words reaching living rooms in faraway lands. 2 billion pairs of eyes fixed on one woman, one car, one story. When the car slowed, photographers readied themselves, cameras raised like soldiers at attention. The moment Catherine stepped out, the photographs would travel through history, frozen in time, studied by future generations the way old portraits of Diana or Queen Elizabeth had been studied before. And then the car came to a stop. The Abbey loomed, its ancient doors shut like the cover of a storybook waiting to be opened. Palace guards stood in perfect formation, their polished uniforms gleaming. The red carpet stretched invitingly toward the entrance. The door of the Rolls-Royce opened, and Catherine, with her father's hand as anchor, stepped into view. A hush fell. It was subtle but unmistakable. Even the lively London crowd seemed to instinctively quiet themselves. Here was not merely a bride, but a symbol of continuity, a living bridge between tradition and modernity. Her gown flowed outward in a train that seemed endless, a river of silken lace shimmering under the daylight. Her sister Pippa, graceful and composed, quickly stepped forward to arrange the fabric with practiced care. Every detail mattered. Every thread, every stitch had been placed with intention. Sarah Burton, the designer who had poured months of painstaking craftsmanship into the gown, watched from within the abbey, heart pounding, praying silently that the dress would rise to its destiny. Catherine lifted her chin, and for the briefest pause at the threshold, she stood perfectly still. One could almost imagine she was listening to the echo of history, to the unspoken prayers of millions, perhaps even to the whisper of her own heart. Her father gave her arm a gentle squeeze. It was time. Together, they took the first steps. The abbey doors swung open. Gasps rippled through the congregation as Catherine appeared. Sunlight spilled into the vast interior, catching her silhouette and transforming her entrance into something almost ethereal. The organ swelled, processional notes rolling like thunder softened by beauty. Heads turned, one after another, a wave of a sweeping through the historic space. Foreign royals, celebrities, dignitaries, and family all craned to see her. The moment she crossed the threshold, time itself seemed to slow. Inside, the air was thick with reverence. Stained glass windows filtered beams of rainbow light, scattering across her gown as though the heavens themselves were blessing her steps. Her smile, calm, radiant, and unmistakably genuine, reassured those watching that she was not overwhelmed but ready. Ready to embrace what lay ahead. At the far end of the aisle stood William. His posture was proud, his uniform impeccable, but his eyes, those betrayed everything. Nervousness melted away the instant he caught sight of her. A smile spread across his face, so full of relief and joy that it seemed to outshine even the grandeur of the abbey. For him, the crowds, the cameras, the billions watching, it all faded. There was only her. The choir lifted their voices in hymn, soaring notes filling every arch and alcove of the 1,000-year-old building. The sound wrapped itself around the congregation, connecting the ceremony to every royal occasion that had come before. And yet, something felt new, different. This wasn't just another chapter in monarchy's story. It was a love story, one that resonated beyond titles and crowns. As Catherine walked further down the aisle, she passed faces both familiar and foreign. Friend from her university days sat among European royalty. Childhood companions brushed shoulders with heads of state. The mingling of her personal life with the immense weight of tradition symbolized a unique position, a bridge between ordinary and extraordinary, between everyday life and royal destiny. Her father's grip tightened briefly, betraying the emotion he had kept hidden. Every parent wonders who their child will become. But who could have imagined this? Tays brimmed but did not fall. His pride held them back. Meanwhile, outside the abbey, the crowd erupted in waves of emotion. Giant screens broadcast Catherine's entrance, and with each step, cheers grew louder. Children waved flags furiously. Adults wiped away tears. Across Britain, street parties turned neighborhoods into pockets of celebration. Strangers toasted to her health, to the couple's happiness, to the enduring spirit of monarchy. Inside, though, calm prevailed. Each step was measured, practiced, graceful. The train of her gown flowed seamlessly behind her, perfectly arranged. Yet for all the rehearsals, there was something alive in her movements, something unscripted. This was not a mechanical entrance. This was a woman embracing her moment with authenticity. At last, she drew close to the altar. William's gaze locked on Hayes, and the nervous tremor in his hand stilled. In that instant, it wasn't about crowns or duty or history. It was about two people, connected by years of love, now standing on the edge of a new beginning. And so the morning continued its crescendo. From the hush of the crowd to the soaring hymns, from the cameras clicking to the collective sighs of awe, the world bore witness to a moment of seamless beauty. Catherine had not merely arrived at Westminster Abbey. She had arrived in history. The fairy tale was no longer imagined. It was unfolding, step by graceful step, before the eyes of the world. Inside, the Abbey had been transformed into a theater of love, devotion, and history. Outside, it became a stage for celebration. Together, these two young royals had not only fulfilled tradition, they had touched hearts. For once, the monarchy wasn't just about crowns and titles. It was about love. And as they prepared to step into the next chapter of their wedding day, one question lingered in the air, unspoken but felt by all. If this was a ceremony, what awaited when they appeared before the people? The answer lay just beyond the abbey doors. The abbey was hushed. For a building that had witnessed centuries of royal moments, coronations, and farewells, there was something uniquely electric about this silence. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the weight of expectation. Every eye was fixed on the altar, every heart beat just a little faster. And there, at the very front, stood Prince William, waiting. His military uniform was sharp, his posture steady, yet his face betrayed what no amount of training could conceal. The instant Catherine appeared in the aisle, his expression softened. His lips curled into a smile, wide and unguarded, the kind of smile that revealed both joy and relief. All the nerves, all the pacing, all the endless adjustments of his jacket melted away in that moment. He was simply a man watching the woman he loved walk toward him. Catherine, radiant in her gown, moved forward with measured grace. Her father at her side walked proudly, though the corners of his eyes glistened with unshed tears. For Michael Middleton, this was more than a wedding procession. It was a memory he would hold on to for the rest of his life. Few fathers could ever imagine their daughter stepping into such a role, yet he bore it with quiet dignity, offering his daughter one last steadying presence before she took her vows. As Catherine drew closer, the choir's voices filled the air, their hymn soaring upward to the vaulted ceiling. The ancient acoustics amplified every note, weaving together sacred music with centuries of history. It felt as though the abbey itself was singing, celebrating, blessing. Finally, she reached William's side. Their eyes locked, and the formality of the moment gave way to something tender. For just an instant, despite the dignitaries, despite the global cameras, despite the millions watching, it seemed as though there were the only two people in the world. The Archbishop of Canterbury, draped in ceremonial robes, stepped forward to begin the sacred rites. His voice, deep and steady, carried through the vast hall. Though the language was formal, the meaning was intimate, the union of two lives, two souls, into one. When it came time for the vows, the silence was complete. You could hear the faint rustle of fabric, the subtle catch of breath, but nothing else. William spoke first, his voice strong yet tinged with emotion. Every word rang clear, reaching even the furthest corners of the abbey. Beneath the traditional phrasing lay something personal, something only he and Catherine fully understood. His military training had taught him composure, but this required a different courage, the courage to stand vulnerable before billions. Catherine's response was steady, her voice calm and assured. Each promise fell like a stone into a still pond, rippling outward with sincerity. She had memorized these words for months, but in this moment they came alive. They were no longer rehearsed. They were real, heartfelt, eternal. The congregation leaned in, not out of curiosity but out of reverence. You could see it in the damp eyes of family members, in the softened expressions of world leaders who had paused their power to simply be human witnesses. And then came the exchange of rings. William reached for the small band of Welsh gold, his hands trembling ever so slightly. This wasn't just a ring. It was a fragment of history, crafted from the same nugget of gold that had formed his grandmother's and mother's wedding rings. As he slid it onto Catherine's finger, the gesture connected her to generations of royal women before her. Queen Elizabeth, Princess Diana, and now Catherine. It was tradition and destiny, wrapped in the simplest of symbols. Catherine's eyes glistened as the ring settled in place. She had always been known for her composure, her steady grace, but here, in this moment, her emotion broke through, and it was beautiful. As the Archbishop pronounced them husband and wife, the abbey erupted, not with applause, for this was no theater, but with a collective sigh, a release of joy that seemed to ripple outward. William and Catherine's smiles lit up the altar. They had done it. They were united, not just as Duke and Duchess, but as two souls bound by love in the presence of history. Queen Elizabeth watched from the front row. Her expression remained composed, as royal protocol demanded, but her eyes, sharp and perceptive, glowed with pride. She had seen many royal weddings across her reign, but this one was special. It was not simply about duty, but about love. William had chosen well, she thought. Catherine's grace, warmth, and ability to connect so naturally would serve the monarchy for decades to come. The service continued with prayers and blessings. Hands folded, heads bowed, whispered words rising into the rafters. For William and Catherine, the weight of tradition pressed down, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. They weren't stepping into history alone. They were supported by centuries of legacy, by faith, by the love of the people who filled both the abbey and the streets beyond. When the choir lifted their voices again, tears welled freely in the congregation. Hardened politicians dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. Foreign royals allowed themselves soft smiles. Even the sternest faces softened under the sheer beauty of it all. The hymns filled the abbey, connecting earth to heaven, past to present, tradition to future. And then, the newlyweds knelt before the archbishop, receiving his final blessing. The sacred words seemed to wrap around them like a cloak. In that moment, they weren't just William and Catherine. They were a couple entrusted with carrying forward a monarchy, a nation's hope, and the weight of love itself. The signing of the marriage register took place in private, a moment of quiet away from the watching world. Hey, in the stillness of St. Edward's Chapel, they shared their first moments as husband and wife. Soft words, gentle touches, smiles exchanged that needed no explanation. For all the grandeur, for all the spectacle, this was an anchor, the intimacy of love, pure and simple. When they emerged again, the transformation was complete. Catherine carried herself not only as a bride but as a duchess, a future queen. Yet she remained grounded, her warmth intact, her humanity untouched. William stood taller, steadier, the nervous groom now replaced by a husband ready to lead with his partner by his side. As they turned to face the congregation, spontaneous applause broke out despite the solemnity of the occasion. It was impossible to contain. The sight of them together, radiant with joy, united in purpose, was overwhelming. And beyond the abbey walls, the world erupted. Bells rang, cheers soared, and television carried the announcement across continents. William and Catherine were married. The vows had been spoken, the rings exchanged, and the blessing received. Within the walls of Westminster Abbey, William and Catherine had been bound not just as Duke and Duchess, but as husband and wife. Yet even as the grandeur of the ceremony settled, one truth lingered. Their day was far from over. The world was waiting beyond the abbey doors, eager for that first glimpse of the newlyweds stepping out together. The great wooden doors creaked open, and daylight poured in. In an instant, sound surged like a tidal wave. Cheers thundered down the Mall, echoing across London, rolling like a jubilant drumbeat through every heart and crowd. Flags waved furiously, children squealed with delight, and the roar was so deafening it seemed almost physical. For Catherine, who had just moments ago been embraced by the solemn hush of the abbey, the sudden wall of noise was breathtaking. She paused, wide-eyed, then smiled. William reached for her hand. That simple gesture, protective yet proud, was caught by cameras around the globe. It told the watching world, we are partners. We face this together. At the top of the abbey steps, they stood hand in hand, waving to the sea of people that stretched as far as the eye could see. Catherine's smile was radiant, her warmth effortless, her wave graceful yet genuine. Awaiting them was the iconic glass carriage, polished to perfection, its gold trim gleaming in the spring sun. This was no ordinary ride. It was a royal procession, a moving stage upon which history would play out. Palace staff carefully arranged Catherine's gown as she stepped inside, ensuring every fold of lace and silk sat flawlessly. William followed, settling beside her as the horses shifted, ready to carry the couple on their first journey as husband and wife. The carriage pulled forward, its wheels crunching against the cobblestones, and London erupted once more. Crowds lined every street, waving flags, tossing confetti, shouting words of love and admiration. Office workers leaned from windows, tossing handfuls of flower petals. Children clutched homemade signs with scrawled declarations of "We love Kate" and "Long live William and Catherine." It wasn't just a wedding, it was a street festival of national pride. Inside the carriage, Catherine gazed out the window, taking in the endless sea of faces. She weighed continuously, her delight genuine and unforced. Though she had studied the footage of past royal processions, nothing could have prepared her for the living reality of thousands cheering in unison, their joy cascading like music through the streets. She turned to William, eyes shining, and he smiled knowingly. London had embraced her, not simply as a duchess, but as one of their own. The procession wound its way through the heart of the city, passing landmarks that told Britain's story. William pointed out places, sharing memories and little anecdotes, grounding the grandeur in something intimate. The cameras captured it all, every wave, every smile, every exchange of glances, and broadcast it across the globe. Commentators marveled at the jubilant crowds, some declaring it the most joyful royal wedding procession in living memory. At last, Buckingham Palace loomed into view, its gates thrown wide in welcome. The horses slowed, the carriage rolled through, and the newlyweds stepped into the private grounds of their new life. But the day's crescendo was still to come. The crowd outside the palace swelled to a breathtaking mass. The mall, as far as the eye could see, was a living sea of flags and faces. Hundreds of thousands had gathered, and their eyes turned upward in expectation. They knew what was next. Inside the palace, William and Catherine allowed themselves a few moments of respite. Staff addressed Catherine as Your Royal Highness for the first time, and she exchanged a look of wonder with her husband. The transformation had been swift but complete. Catherine Middleton was now Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge. The weight of it settled gently, not as a burden, but as a mantle she was ready to carry. Then came the summons. It was time. The palace doors opened, and William and Catherine stepped onto the famous balcony. The roar that rose from the crowd was unlike anything heard that day. Thunderous, uncontainable, joyful, the sound swelled upward, enveloping the couple in a wave of love. Catherine stepped forward, her gown glistening in the light, and raised her hand in a confident wave. The sight of her, framed by the palace, was instantly iconic. The crowd began to chant. They wanted the kiss, the gesture that had become tradition, a symbol of love not just for the couple but for the nation itself. William turned. Catherine smiled, and in that small exchange of glances, the decision was made. He leaned in, and their lips met in a tender, modest kiss. The crowd erupted. Flags surged higher, and the cheer that followed seemed to shake the very stones of the palace. Cameras clicked, capturing the moment that would soon appear on magazine covers, in history books, in memory forever. But the crowd wasn't satisfied. They chanted again, louder this time. "Kiss her! Kiss her!" William laughed. Catherine blushed, and together they indulged the crowd with a second kiss, slightly longer, slightly more playful. Once again, the cheers were deafening. It was a moment of pure connection, where monarchy and public, formality and joy, met in perfect harmony. Above, the Royal Air Force prepared its tribute. The sky filled with the roar of engines as vintage and modern aircraft flew in flawless formation over the mall. The sight was breathtaking, jets trailing plumes of red, white, and blue across the sky, a crown of color above the city. William and Catherine looked upward, shielding their eyes, delight written across their faces. The flypast was both a salute to tradition and a promise of continuity. For a few more precious minutes, the couple lingered on the balcony, waving, smiling, pointing out handmade banners and signs. Catherine's natural warmth shone through. She seemed genuinely touched by every gesture of support, every smiling face. This was no distant royal figure. This was a woman who connected, a duchess who belonged. At last, the balcony doors closed behind them. The cheers continued outside, but inside the palace, a different silence settled, a private, reflective one. William and Catherine exchanged a glance, both smiling in disbelief at the magnitude of what had just unfolded. They were no longer just bride and groom. They were the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, partners not only in love, but in duty, bound to a life of public service, of challenges, of moments both heavy and beautiful. As the celebration continued across Britain, street parties alive with music, laughter, and clinking glasses, one truth became clear. This wedding had not only united two people, it had refreshed a monarchy, reminded a nation of its traditions, and given the world a glimpse of something it longs for: love, partnership, and hope. From the abbey to the carriage, from the palace balcony to the skies above, William and Catherine's day had left its mark. It wasn't simply a royal wedding. It was a story of destiny, devotion, and the kind of love that bridges the past and the future. And as they retreated into the palace to begin their private celebration, the cheers still echoing beyond the gates, one lasting impression remained. This was the day a bride became a duchess, a couple became royalty, and history welcomed them into its embrace.